What are we going to do when the war comes to our homeland? It doesn't matter how tired you are. It's going to be there. You're not going to be able to walk away from it. It seems like almost my entire adult life, we've been at war one way or another, right? I think so many of you out there that are listening to this are also now reflecting that I've said that and can say, yeah. I mean, since 2000, I would even say since pre-2001, you know, we have been dealing with Al-Qaeda. We've been dealing with, you know, adversaries that are constantly at our toes, ready to target us. But especially since 2001, I feel like we have been at war one way or another. And we're a generation of Americans that really have not had a break. We have not had a break. And regardless of what the Biden administration is saying right now, regardless of what President Biden and his troop of merry minions in Washington, D.C.'s bubble chooses to say right now, we don't want to escalate this situation. We're still going to retaliate for the deaths of these 3 U.S. Army engineers who were killed by a drone near the Syrian border in Jordan. By the way, I have been right up to the border, but the Syrian border in Iraq, I know the area very well, and I can only imagine. Jordan obviously is a different game altogether. Jordan is an ally of the United States. We have had many service members overseas who have been stationed in Jordan and are perfectly safe. Obviously, that is just a dream now. That is just a dream. There is no safety anywhere right now in the Middle East. You know, to a large extent right now, the Iranian regime, this crackpot regime, cult regime, wants and has wanted to expand their Shia presence across what I call the whole Middle East. They want to create a crescent. We used to say the Shia crescent. They want to move across the whole Middle East. They want to control it. They want to own it, which is the reason why Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and others are partnering with the United States very closely in trying to fend off the Iranian expansion in the Middle East. There is a very distinct difference between the Sunni and the Shia. Although sometimes I think they eat out of the same plate as well, as long as, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, sort of thing. But right now, we have been a nation at war. And I'm going to explain to you what that is like. I will take you there with me. I've seen it. I've seen it up close and personal. I want to take a moment, and I want every one of you out there to take a moment to really pray for the families of those that have lost their lives recently. This is the very beginning of a very, very dangerous situation between the United States and our enemies overseas. And this escalation has happened, in my opinion, because of a very weak administration that has allowed our adversaries to gain traction, not only in the Middle East, but what we are seeing now between in Europe with Ukraine and the rise of the Russian beast, Vladimir Putin. And we are putting ourselves in a very dangerous predicament. I want you to think about this before I read the names, before I go on to the commercial break, before I do anything. The enemy has their say. The enemy has their say. No matter how bad you wish you weren't involved in a war, no matter how much you wish you could turn your back on it and walk away from it, no matter how much you wish that the men and women of our armed forces would be safe and would be at home and that we'd be prosperous, God willing, that happens in November with a new president in office. But no matter how much you pray for that, you want that, no matter how much I want that, the enemy does have their say. On Sunday, U.S. Army engineers, there were 3 of them, were killed by a drone near the Syrian border in Jordan. More than 40 other service members stationed at Tower 22 were also injured in that blast, several of which were serious enough to merit an emergency evacuation to Landstuhl, Germany. That is where my husband was evac'd. And I'll go into that a little bit more when they took him out of Afghanistan, because that is where the most dire injuries are taken if they can make it that far. And they can actually receive specialized medical care there. The names of these soldiers were Sergeant William Jerome Rivers of Carlton, Georgia. God rest his soul. He was 46 years old. Specialist Kennedy Landon Saunders of Waycross, Georgia, and Specialist Brianna Alexandria Moffitt of Savannah, Georgia. They were 23 and 24 years old, very young. They were apparently sleeping when this drone came through, just bypassed all U.S. radar, all U.S. equipment. It's still under investigation. There's some rumors that the people who are operating the systems believed this drone to be American. None of this makes sense. And we lost 3 very precious Americans overseas serving our nation. And my heart just goes out to their families. The Navy identified also, we've lost 2 Navy SEALs. I want everybody to remember this in the war. Yes, in a very real war, an undeclared war, but one that is happening right under our noses, with our servicemen and women overseas. The Navy identified those 2 SEALs who died following a boarding mission in the Arabian Sea earlier this month. That was Navy Special Warfare Operator First Class Christopher Chambers. He was 37 years old. And Navy Special Warfare Operator Second Class Nathan Ingram. He was 27. They went missing during a mission, and apparently they were lost at sea when one of them went in to save the other out in the Arabian Ocean. And that could be, the Arabian Sea. And that is, I can't even imagine what their families went through, right? Because what is going on here? What is going on here? Am I going to spend the rest of my life? I'm going to leave this planet as we continue this warfare, as we continue to try to ward off our enemies, as we have a president and an administration in place that is so feckless and has such little regard for what is happening overseas. They're not carrying a big stick here, folks. They're handing out olive branches to our enemies. That is what is happening here in the United States. And no matter how much you wish, and I'm going to say this again because I hear a lot of people on the right, on the left, in the middle, wherever you stand. I'm tired of war. I'm tired of war. Tired. Okay. I'm tired of war. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. Every single day I have to see my husband blind. I'm tired of war. Every time I see a wounded veteran from, Operation Enduring Freedom, or from what was happening in Iraq, or, every time I say to myself, I am tired of war. But remember, the enemy has their say. And I'm going to explain that to you in a minute. On today's show, I do want to share that with you. I want to go over some of the time I spent in Afghanistan covering the war and in Iraq, and how that was, the Middle East and South Asia, and what it was like to be in an attack on a military installation, what that felt like, what that was like, what our troops go through every single day. What does it mean when your safe place is attacked? What does that mean? But first, I want to tell you about MyPillow. Why do I love MyPillow and Mike Lindell? Well, because they're an American company and they care about American workers and they care about you, the American people. And MyPillow employees, they want to thank my listeners. And I just love the employees for MyPillow. They want to thank all of you for all of your continued support. It's so awesome. You have been so phenomenal, and you're so phenomenal for this podcast because we are able to bring great guests onto this show and tell you all these amazing stories and take you right into the hornet's den without you having to be in there, right? And bring you the news first right here at the Sara Carter Show. They want to thank you for that with an enormous blowout sale. Right now, you can get MyPillow's best prices ever and free shipping on your entire order. I want you to think about that. 50% off MyPillow 2.0, 50% off brand new flannel sheets. They just arrived, so they won't last long. Order them now. Visit mypillow.com/Carter, that's CARTER, and enter code Carter, CARTER at checkout for your free shipping and huge discounts, including the Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98. You can't beat that. Go to mypillow.com/Carter, code Carter. Go to mypillow.com/Carter, code Carter, CARTER, or call 1-800-685-7221. So I want to take you to Afghanistan around 2008, my very, very first trip. I had to fill out all of my paperwork at the Pentagon. I was with the Washington Times. I had to get my blood test. I remember that. Get my blood test, go get all of my inoculations for diseases. I mean, I have so many inoculations. I don't even know where to begin. Vaccines for everything in that area. Pick up my malaria medication. So there was a facility in Washington, D.C. I'm still there. It's a clinic. We would have that clinic available to us. So if it was short notice and I had to get over to the war zone, I could just go to that clinic, wait in line, get all my stuff, get my paperwork, and then that would be the paperwork that I would turn in to the Pentagon. And in order to be embedded, it's a whole process. You don't just pack your bags and, your editor sends in a letter and says, hey, she's going to go to the war zone. No, we need that letter from our editor, but we need to give it to people at the Pentagon who approve our embed. And we need to basically sign away our life and say, that they will not be responsible, of course, if we lose our life on the battlefield covering, and they being our U.S. military covering the war. Because once you're there, you're there. There's no way out. It's kind of like you're climbing a really tall tower, but you're afraid of heights, but the only way down is to rappel. So you have no other choice. Once you do it, you're there. You've jumped into the situation. You're in a war zone. And for a lot of people who are journalists or who are reporters, and I hear it all the time, like, I want to be in a war zone. I want to go to the war. I want to go cover the war in Afghanistan. I want to cover the war in Iraq. And I say, you get what you wish for when you're there. You really do. It is not glamorous at all. It is gut-wrenching. And some of those reporters, some of those photographers get there once, they cover the war, and they never go back because it's too much. Our troops don't have that choice. They don't have that choice. Not really. I'm not going to go AWOL, although we had some of that happen. For the most part, these are the bravest men and women you can ever imagine. They have volunteered it's an all volunteer service, to go to a place that is so remotely different from our nation. So remotely different that it's almost as if you were being, and especially in Afghanistan, being transported 2,000 years into the past, literally pre-Christ in some areas. I'm not joking. I saw people there. I thought if I could have imagined Moses or Abraham or, any of the very first tribes, I would have said, holy smokes, that guy's the closest I've ever seen. One guy I remember up on a mountain. I was going over the pass. Salong Pass. And I remember this one old man, and I have a picture of him somewhere. I'm going to post it on X and on Instagram. But he had a long, long white beard, and he was sitting on this hammock in a tent, and he was surrounded by had a couple of kittens, and there was a goat, and then there was a dog. I really did think I had run into Moses. I was like, this, I've run into somebody. Somebody's here. This just doesn't even look real. So you're transported into the past. You're transported into a time that many of us have forgotten, because many of us have no connection with it at all. Why? Because I'm sure, like many of you, your kids are at home playing video games. You've got running water in a sink. You've got a flushable toilet. You could go to the grocery store to buy your food. You can call friends on your phone. You can get in your car and drive around and, go to a baseball game or go see a movie or just chill on your couch, right? And hang out with your family. Make dinner on your kitchen stove. It's not like that there. So now imagine all these volunteers, right, in our military, just training, for war, ready to get out there, ready to defend our nation, and they are taken back in time. Now, I had to fill out all of that paperwork and guarantee the Pentagon that the work that I was going to do there was serious, that I took my job serious. I had training prior to going into the war zone. I trained with the British SAS, with other journalists in Virginia. We were training with them regarding IEDs, what to do if an improvised explosive device goes off, what do I do if I lose my arm and I have to do immediate emergency, immediate emergency tourniquet for my arm to stop the blood bleeding, or my leg. How do I handle that on another human being? What would I do if I was kidnapped? What would I do if somebody threatened me on a base? How do I handle those situations? That is something I was trained for. That is something that the majority of, I believe, all journalists who were in the war zone that worked with me there were trained for. And then we are put into a unit. We have no idea who they are. We just maybe know that we want to be with Stryker Brigade or with this brigade or with that brigade, or we're going to Salerno. And I'll talk about that in a second, because that's where I first experienced a major attack. It was called Rocket City. And then we're embedding with them, which means we are staying with them. We are going on missions with them, and we have to keep up with them. They cannot baby us. They are not going to carry my bags. They are not going to help me get from point A to point B. But I am going to be with them to document their story. That is it. I am there with them to be with them. And of course, we develop relationships and friendships with these folks, and we talk to them, and we're there with them, and we have the same experiences. We bond because it's war. And it is a terrifying, scary, sad, sometimes exhilarating, sometimes kind of unbelievable situation. You really, really know what life is when you come very, very close to watching your life disappear before your eyes. Just ask anyone. And when I was in Salerno, when I was at that base, like I said, they called it Rocket City. It was Forward Operating Base Salerno. It was in Khost Province. It was a very dangerous area, and because the Taliban had basically infiltrated the majority of that region, and there was constantly heavy fire, constantly, and there were IEDs going off all the time. In fact, I remember leaving that base one time, going into the city of Khost, very dangerous. I went in there with 2 interpreters. It was crazy. That was a crazy time. We almost didn't make it back. And we had to literally drive their little Toyota. It was like a beat up Toyota. And I was in this really cheap polyester Sharwa chemise. And it was a long blouse with long pants, and my head was wrapped, and we were going out to meet a newspaper, actually a real small newspaper there in Khost province that was trying to operate on the Afghan side. And it was so dangerous that we had to actually leave one of the drivers, one of the interpreters in the car, because they were afraid that they would put bombs in the car when I got back, that maybe somebody would recognize me and try to blow up my car, or they would know the interpreters and try to put bombs in there so that when we got back near the base, it would go off. And I literally had to drive around these roads that had already been bombed out where US soldiers had lost their lives. So think about what was happening there in Jordan. My first night at Forward Operating Base Salerno, I was at the press, like the hooch, it was like this, like a tent where the press kind of met up. But in Salerno, it was kind of a permanent building. It was kind of made up, it was of wood, but not very good wood. The whole area used to be, that whole area of Khost province apparently used to be covered in trees. But when the Soviets were there, and the Soviet, during the time the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, the area was literally destroyed by Soviet bombing. And it destroyed all of the natural wonder that was Khost province. So it was this very desolate area when I got there, and our base was exposed to the Taliban. And I was there, at this, and I'm trying to think of the type of wood that they used to build this building, because it was a bit flimsy. I can't remember right now, but it was nice. It had a little deck area where the soldiers would go out and sit and smoke cigarettes, or just look up at the stars, or make phone calls, or sit out there, even sometimes with their Afghan interpreters to talk. And the area was just pitch black, because there was no city lights. So it was the first time that I really, really got a look at the sky, the stars, the way our ancestors must have seen it, before city lights, before city states, right? Looking up, and it was just, I was overwhelmed by the beauty of the night sky there and just how incredible it was. I was so overwhelmed by the beauty of the night sky that I didn't hear the missiles coming in to the base, even though I had been trained for it, even though I had heard these before in my training. Like, they were like, this is what's going to sound like, this is what you got to do. And I heard, pew, and I heard, pew, pew, pew. And I was just laying there like, what is that amazing sound that I'm listening to? And all of a sudden, the sirens go off on the base. Everybody take shelter. We're being targeted. We're being attacked. And I mean, it takes a second for you to realize, oh my gosh, shit, we are under attack. This is it. And, I ran in, I was donning my gear, putting on my flak vest, putting on my helmet, getting my stuff ready, grabbing my satellite system that I had. And I also had a phone that I could use, a sat phone, to call back. And while we were being bombed, and most of them, I mean, it's just so random, but they were hitting the airfield on Salerno while that was happening, Rocket City. While that was happening, I was calling the story in to my editor back home at the Washington Times. And he was typing as I was telling the story, and telling him what was going on. It was immediate. It was intense. It was terrifying. And I ended up going back to Afghanistan for 7 more years. After that, 7.5, I kept going back. I feel blessed that I have not lost my life, right? I feel blessed. My husband and I, or that I didn't lose an arm, or that I didn't lose a leg. Joel Silva, who was a photographer for the New York Times. He almost lost his life. He lost both of his legs. I remember him being in the hospital next to my husband after my husband was wounded in 2011, and Joel had been in there for a year. He and I were on the same base. We were at Kandahar Airfield that year that he was wounded, and I ended up in Zabul province, and he ended up on another road that was hit by an IED. God bless him. Amazing, amazing journalist, amazing photographer. You know, I'm kind of going to go just a little bit sideways here because just for a second, because I hear so many stories, you know, there's so much negativity, and rightfully so, with some journalists and how things have been handled in the United States, especially post Trump, and even during especially during Trump's presidency. I saw it myself. And we've seen the disinformation campaigns. We've seen so many journalists, and right now the LA Times is, you know, laid off almost all of their reporters and their desk. I mean, it's terrible. I'm not cheering this. We've seen some of these news agencies in the pocket of, you know, politicians and political parties, and everybody's a little guilty. I am no longer working as a pure journalist as I did at the Daily Bulletin, at the Washington Times, when I wrote for USA Today, when I wrote for World News Report, when I wrote for Arutz Sheva or any of the other ones. I am right now an investigative columnist, and I have an opinion, and I've made that very clear. After I finished covering the Russia hoax, I made that very clear. But I want you to think about this. There have been a lot of journalists who have lost their lives, who have been injured permanently in the wars, covering the wars, who have given everything to get the truth out, whether those are U.S. journalists or journalists in Mexico who are up against the drug cartels, or journalists that I know who are up against, political parties and the most dangerous terrorists in Pakistan and Afghanistan, who are trying to get the truth out. They are trying to inform the public. And this little side note is that there are brilliant, wonderful, amazing human beings that are willing to sacrifice everything to get the truth out and to be a voice for the voiceless and to save this republic. You can't have democracy, you can't have a republic without that balance. And we need to get back there. But I also think we need to take a step back and realize that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And now we see what is happening in Jordan. We see the loss of these beautiful lives, and I see their pictures, and I can only imagine what it must have felt like when their families got word. And that's something that maybe you don't know a lot about. And I was really frustrated when I was a journalist and I was covering the war in Afghanistan, because I kept telling the commanders at the highest levels of ISAF, that was our international security forces, and our highest levels, you know, within the United States as well, is like, we need to make our nation a part of this war. I mean, we need to bring them here. It can't be we're doing this over here and America's doing that over there, because Americans are not connecting with what our troops are facing overseas. And I would say we should show the coffins and the flags draped over those coffins as they get on board those planes, and everybody standing outside of the tents in Bagram as those coffins make their last journey out of that hellhole, that war zone, back home to their families. And they wouldn't do it. You know, it's easy to be tired of a war that you don't want to hear about anymore on the news. Imagine how hard it is to be tired of a war when you're 23, 24 years old, 46 with a family, and you can't leave it. You don't have a choice. You're fighting to protect your nation. You're fighting for your families, not just theirs, for each and every one of you. You come home with those wounds, and nobody wants to talk about it anymore. Nobody wants to be bothered by it. It's over, move on. Or I'm just tired of war. I don't want it anymore. But folks, the enemy has their say. Our border's been wide open now for over 3.5 years. You don't think that terrorists have made their way into this country? You don't think that our adversaries like China and Russia have taken advantage of that situation? Are you even aware that the United States is not prepared as it was in the past after World War II to fight a two-front war? We don't have that capability anymore. What are we going to do when the war comes to our homeland? It doesn't matter how tired you are. It's going to be there. You're not going to be able to walk away from it. Now, what do we need? We need a president in office in November that is going to not only understand that, but not be afraid to stand up to these adversaries that are positioning themselves to target us. And I want you to take a moment to understand that although we have not declared this war, there is a war occurring overseas. Iran and the United States and Israel and our allies in Europe are watching what is going on, and they are worried and they are scared. And the public overall, from America to the streets of Paris, to the streets in Pakistan, because I'm talking to sources there, are worried about the direction our world is heading in. And our adversaries are watching us closely. Those 2 Navy SEALs, those 3 Army soldiers did not die in vain. They died at the hands of an enemy that wants to destroy the Western world. Trust me. That is what they want to do. And they are watching a feckless leader, President Biden, and his administration that has failed us in such extraordinary, unbelievable ways, make it easy for them to do so. The only way we can really, truly honor the people that have died and have given their lives for this nation. I'm going to say their names again because I believe their names are important. They are important. And I want to keep doing this. I don't want it to just be numbers. This isn't about numbers. This is about people that have given their lives for you and for me. So we're going to say their names. We're going to say Sergeant William Jerome Rivers of Georgia, Specialist Kennedy Landon Sanders of Georgia, and Specialist Brianna Moffitt of Georgia. The 2 Navy SEALs, again, were Navy Special Warfare Operator First Class Christopher Chambers, 37, and Navy Special Warfare Operator Second Class Nathan Ingram, 27. The best way we can honor them, these amazing human beings, and I've had many friends injured and friends who have died on the battlefield, is to pray for them and their families. Number one, I totally, absolutely believe in prayer. And I believe that we honor them by praying for them and giving their families strength and letting their family know that we love them and support them in this terrible, terrible time. That as Americans, we are one family, regardless of what political party you're affiliated with. This has nothing to do with politics. And come November, or any election, even your local election for your school board, we get out there and we vote and we protect the Constitution the best way we know how from our position as warriors inside our nation. And we speak up and we speak out. The greatest power our enemies have, both inside this country and outside this country, guess what it is? It's our silence. Don't be afraid. Be brave. Stand up and fight. And realize that there are people in this world, like those specialists, some as young as 22, 23, 18, 19, in places far from home, willing to give everything to defend the Constitution that many of us sometimes forget about and sometimes take for granted. Just remember, thank you so much for being here, everything that you do. Remember that I'm here for you as well. We are one big family. This is America. We are here to save it, protect it, all of us, every single one of us. That's how important you are. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Sara Carter Show on your favorite podcast app. It helps us keep the show free. That's a good sign, and really gives us a boost in our algorithm, which is very, very important. If you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, give us a like and a follow as well. Thank you so much for being a part of my life. I truly appreciate it, and I hope I've given you something back. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on X at Sara Carter DC, and we'll be doing spaces on there as well, and on Instagram at S Carter DC. God bless you. God bless our troops and all of those who serve our nation in whichever capacity that may be. God bless this beautiful nation. God bless you and the families of those soldiers and SEALs who have perished. God bless you in the great state of Texas. Thank you.